And here we are, folks. We're talking about one of the biggest movies of the year with one of the smallest panels of the year you'll see on a movie review show. We are talking about Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, which I think Universal Pictures should have gone with the Emerald Fennel treatment of Wuthering Heights from a few months ago and put quotes around the title and all the posters because wow. But anyway, we're going to be talking about the Odyssey in full spoilerific detail tonight. And with me is my wonderful partner in crime, one of Earth's mightiest critics, indeed, Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck. How you doing, Mark?
We're doing good. Good to be here. Interested to have this discussion. So I wanted to talk to you about it. We did a discussion earlier in the week for my Patreon on this. So, but I wanted to talk to you as well on it because I know you have opinions on it.
What? No.
Yeah.
I do have opinions, and I shared them on Twitter a week ago.
That's your first mistake.
Well, I shared a social media reaction once I got out of the press screening that was held in Chicago last Monday night, which, one of the reactions, not so amazingly, but it's one of those things where you see it happen to other people. And then when it happens to you, you're like, really, people think this way. One of the reactions I got was, you didn't see it. No one's seen it. The screenings don't happen until later in the week. I'm like, uh-huh.
I love those ones. Those ones are always great.
Yeah.
So, or the other one, you got paid. Like if it's positive, they paid you. And I'm like, I get paid for reviews. When's that check?
I know. I really wish. But no, I had a very negative reaction to the Odyssey, partially because I think I had finished reading Robert Fagel's translation of it about 6 hours before the screening. So it was fresh in my mind. Before that, 2 weeks before that, I finished reading Robert Fagel's translation of the Iliad. Post-screening, because I want to do some homework, I read portions of Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey, which by many accounts was used as sort of the basis for this film. And then today, again at lunch, merely 6 hours before this conversation, I read something that surprised me as being a far more faithful adaptation to Homer's epic poem than Christopher Nolan came up with. From IDW Comics, yes, it's Godzilla's Odyssey. It actually tells the story of the Odyssey, except for the monsters you know and love. It's creatures from the Godzilla universe, and instead of being assisted in his journey by Athena, it's Godzilla.
It's Mothra or Godzilla?
No, Mothra. Oh, actually, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't read the comic. I recommend that you do. Mothra shows up as the pattern that Penelope is weaving on her loom.
Oh wow!
It's almost a sight gag. It's very cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah. So I was not happy with the film, and this rarely happens. I come out of a screening and I'm just utterly despondent. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I gave my social media reaction like later. I emailed the publicist instead of talking to the army of publicists they had right outside the auditorium, because I just wanted to get, much like Odysseus, I just wanted to get home. Fortunately, I got a lift with a fellow critic and friend, I should put that in reverse order, David Fowley, who could not join us tonight due to some personal matters. I hope everything's going okay, David. We're rooting for you. But he gave me a lift home, and on that hour-long ride, we gradually kind of unpacked the movie, because I haven't read his review of it yet. But in that initial aftermath, he wasn't so high in the film, which was a very different vibe than you can imagine the rest of the lobby, which was just, agog with people, fawning all over this movie. My estimation of it has plummeted in the week plus since, because the more I think about it, the more I consider this to be a vandalizing of Homer's Odyssey. I don't want to say it's done with malintent, but once you break it down, like if you've read the book and you've watched the movie and you understand the themes and what's going on with each and every one of the characters, you can't help but wonder, does Christopher Nolan have a grudge against Homer? I don't get it. So, Mark, I'm done jawboning for now. What were your thoughts on the Odyssey? And look, I know your trademark saying is words burn whenever it comes to reading.
They do.
But have you read the Odyssey? Did you go with that thing where you had to read it in high school, or did you read like a Cliff Notes?
I have not read the Odyssey. I've read parts of it. I have not read the full of it. I know some of them from cultural references. Most I know from the Odyssey is what I've seen from films like, you know, Ray Harryhausen films and also Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I do get the references in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Because if you're into fantasy stuff, like I have been since I was little, Dungeons and Dragons and all of that, lots of elements from the Odyssey have worked their way into those type of materials. So I know, you know, I'm familiar with the creatures. I'm familiar with, you know, history as well, and bits and pieces here. I saw Troy. I watch a lot of movies, so I have not read the full Odyssey though, full disclosure. So I know nothing as far as literary accuracy or anything for it. So I went in pretty much cold as far as that goes. Now I
just want to say I'm glad that's the case, because one of the things I've been trying to put myself in the mindset of is someone who's watching the movie without having read the story, like not having the what it should have been in their mind when they're watching us, purely as entertainment, purely as a Christopher Nolan at least admirer. I don't know if you would call yourself a fan, but we can maybe talk about that. But I'm sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to set that table.
No, that's fine. Yeah, and that's why I understand where you're coming from, and I've seen that from a few other people as well who really love the actual source material, even though it's been translated in many different ways. They really like the source material, and some of them were critical or did not care for the changes. And I'm not talking about casting. I'm just talking about the story wise, because casting, you know, I'm sorry, if anybody has never seen a stage play, that people complaining about, oh, they put this person in this role or whatnot, I'm like, if you've seen stage plays, you know they pick people for either talent or whatnot. And I get some casting, but for me, the casting wasn't a big deal. I understand some people, that's a big gripe. That's for them. I'm not familiar with the story. Nolan has waned on me. I'm a big Batman fan. I loved Inception. Okay. I think The Prestige is awesome. Okay.
That's 20 this year, I think. And I think we're going to talk about that in the fall.
Yeah. And I love Prestige. I like Memento. You know, I loved Inception. You know, I loved his earlier work.
Did you? Here's a question. And if the answer is no, I'm not surprised, because no one has seen this comparatively. Did you ever see his first film, Following?
No, I have not.
I think it's on Criterion. You can probably rent it on Amazon or something. That is, wow.
Sure.
That's great.
So, yeah. And the other reason I'm sorry, long-winded in setting this up is just that, again, not familiar with the Odyssey source material as much as I am familiar with the filmmakers material, which is why I'm setting it up. So for me going into it, it wasn't from a perspective of a lover or very knowledgeable of the book and source material. It's me as a film consumer knowing Nolan stuff. Now, being the DC shill, if you will, or whatnot, I love a lot of the comic book films in various degrees. Some of them really sting. I'm not just solely DC, but you know, for me, I think Nolan fans are as passionate about him as Snyder fans are. And so when somebody comes out being maybe possibly critical, and we've seen this all the way back since Dunkirk about Nolan, it's, you don't know what you're talking about. Nolan just crafts masterpieces. He, you know, gold flies out of his ears and his nose, and he walks on water, and, you know, and I get that. And that's fine if you're a big fan of his. For me, when it hit Dunkirk, the luster really started to get lost on Nolan and his style of storytelling, because I started to see a very familiar pattern, and it was really extreme with Dunkirk, so much that it was distracting. Oppenheimer wasn't quite as bad, but we had that discussion last year to where there were segments of Oppenheimer I kind of wish weren't there. This one with the Odyssey, it did feel more restrained, and the way the narrative plays out with Odysseus working on memories, the non-linearism worked better here, as far as that didn't feel quite so jarring. But for me, even though I rated this 4 out of 5, the 4 out of 5 is for The 4 out of 5 is the same way I rated Oppenheimer. It's for the technical aspects. I love the fact he shot on film. I love the using cast. I love all the technical movie elements, kind of the older school approach he was trying to take with this, with making a film an epic, if you will. I love all of that. I enjoyed the side characters actually more than our main characters in this film, in all honesty. But when it comes to the story itself of what he was telling, I was not invested in it. The performances are fine, and I'm watching this going, it should be hitting me more. And I've seen other people talk about how it hit. And I'm like, I'm just kind of, there were parts that were emotional, but it's almost 3 hours long. So those are few and far between. And then there's some decisions he made that I was familiar with that I was like, well, that was a choice, namely with the Cyclops scene. And
I think
reasoning. What? Go ahead.
No, I want to get into that because I think that's the Cyclops scene is a great gateway into the fundamental problems with this movie. So we'll start there, but wrap up.
I'll just wrap it up. So yes, I did rate it high, similar to Oppenheimer, but I rated it for a lot of elements, but not his storytelling or, in all honesty, his direction. Part of the thing that I mentioned in my review is I think part of it was the mistake of shooting it completely in IMAX.
Yeah.
So that, because I noticed people who enjoy the film, it varies on what format they saw it on too. I saw it on a mega screen, but not on a 70 millimeter mega screen. Those who've seen it on 70 millimeter enjoy it more. Those who've seen it on IMAX really enjoy it, and immersive and epic and swappy. For me, I watched it on a regular sized mega screen. So I don't know if weaknesses came out more or if it's just one of those things to where things were cut off. So you were missing some things of this epicness that people were talking about. But I think that's hurts it more, is the fact that he went with the biggest format possible, which I understand artistically great, but when you watch it on a smaller screen, it is not as impactful.
Yeah, I did see it. It was odd because the press screening, they showed it in 70 millimeter, but it wasn't in IMAX. It was just in one of the like the Dolby butt rumbler seats kind of auditoriums. Actually, no, I don't think it was the Dolby. It was just one of they had a 70 millimeter projection, and I still am not necessarily on that train. It just seems like a slightly bigger screen. Now, I understand it's really helpful because there's been a lot of side-by-side comparisons online of like, here's what this frame looks like in 70 millimeter IMAX. Here's what it looks like if you just go to your regular matinee. And there is a big difference. Now, sometimes it's just like, well, the crest of the helmet is getting cut off or whatever, but that does ruin sort of the scope of the individual, even the close-ups and the medium shots. I saw a very interesting take. I think David might have posted it. People are now complaining that it's sort of almost classist or elitist, those who are seeing it in 70 millimeter IMAX versus the ones who can't afford the tickets, which are 2 to 3 times more expensive, which I think it's an interesting argument, but that also gets into the box office, which is I kind of want to talk about that in a little bit, but not necessarily right now.
We can, because I've made some comments on Facebook pages that almost, I think, got me blocked. So
wow.
No, just joking, but still, I think people have ignored. But
yeah, well, first, before we get into it, because we are just kind of ramping up, we do have it's not a comment, but it's the emojis from Scotty321. Scotty, I know who you
laughing.
are. Yes, he's laughing. I think it might have been something I said.
Scotty doesn't know. Scotty doesn't know. Scotty doesn't know.
A better movie featuring Matt Damon. Anyhow, go see Eurotrip, everybody, if you haven't.
Yes.
Or rent it, I guess.
Or rent it, yeah.
Now, I do need to pull over for a second because I did, as I told you, and this isn't a brag. In fact, most people are going to find this kind of pathetic, but I had that tweet I mentioned coming out of the press screening last week.
Yeah.
It got the most traction, the most reach of anything I've ever put out on social media. I think it got like it's at 62,000 impressions.
Wow, man.
I guess that means people have seen it, and I've gotten a lot of, a decent amount of retweets, a bunch of comments, lots of ugly stuff. So what I want to say is we are happy if anybody's following us over from, X or anywhere else on social media, but I do feel the need to read ye old disclaimer. Christopher Nolan's Odyssey is more than a pop cultural event. It's become another salvo in the culture wars. We at Kicking the Seat want to encourage free and open debate here tonight, both on our panel and in the comments, but only respectful and or relevant comments will be read on the show. If you're dropping into troll, insult, or post nonsense, don't waste your time. We won't be wasting ours. I have unfortunately had to draft that in the recent months. Fortunately, the amount of trolldom seems to have died down, and that's not to say we don't want to have fun. We just want to keep things kind of on point. And also, I think this movie really deserves a serious discussion as to what it is, why it's so successful, and why that's kind of a harsh commentary on where we are at kind of globally, socially, particularly in terms of reading rates. But Mark, let's start with the Cyclops. Now,
yes.
Actually, let's rewind a bit. Odysseus plays Matt Damon.
Odysseus plays Matt Damon. Wow, that's a role of a lifetime. He's been waiting for that role for centuries.
Yes. He's in Hades right now.
Yes,
talking about them apples. Anyhow, Matt Damon plays Odysseus.
Yes, he does.
Mark, who is Odysseus? What is your understanding of the man and his character?
My understanding, as far as some of the research I did afterwards and some that my son told me about, or in the film,
based on the material that you watched, none of the post game.
Okay. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Odysseus is a man who is burdened by the weight of what he had done and what he had caused with the events of Troy. They weigh heavily on him, and he just wants to get home because he misses his family. He cares for his soldiers, but he also has to make some hard decisions, which in the end, he doesn't want to make either decision, but he knows he has to make one. But he always seems to have this kind of regret and melancholy lingering over him, even when he's being successful later on. He really just seems like he's constantly making the mistakes, and each mistake burdens him even more and wakes him up to, his flaws. But he's somewhat flawed when we meet him. So
when you never felt. Are you talking about the chronology of the movie or the chronology of the story as presented by the movie?
The chronology. Well, the story with him in it and the events that happen, you watch his character, but my idea of him is that he's a smart military guy who served his king, even though he didn't quite believe in the mission, and he came up with something that he thought could finally end the war so he could go home. That's really his motivation for what he ends up doing, not realizing the massive consequence of actually opening the gates to Troy. And so it seems like a guy who carries a lot of regret after the events of Troy constantly.
Okay. Yeah.
Almost humbled,
Right. And I think that is what Christopher Nolan, and to a certain extent, from what I've read of Emily Wilson's translation, that's what they're going for. The opening line is, tell me of a complicated man. That's not the traditional interpretation, or I should say translation. And I want to just kind of say, I don't think Wilson is translating the Odyssey. She is recontextualizing it and simplifying the language so it's more accessible to people of a modern age. That's the case that she's making. But I got to say, with Fagles, it's a bit more of a commitment, but not by much. It's not. I mean, it's far easier to read than William Shakespeare. and very, very exciting. I mean, when I got to the last passages of the Odyssey, the last couple of books, especially the Massacre of the Suitors, I had the cast in mind when I was reading this book, and that kind of helped to make sense of some of the names because there's very similar ones, and they're all Greek and very complicated. And when you hear them spoken out loud, they're like, I did not hear that in my head, but I was thinking, wow, Christopher Nolan has a big job to do. Based on some of the stuff I'd seen in the trailers, I was kind of getting my hopes up because the end battle with the suitors is bloody, it's clever, it plays a lot with kind of geography, and then the aftermath of the Suitor massacre is almost worse on the page. I was thinking this movie could upset people, and it upset me, but not for the reasons that I had expected. Anyhow, the Cyclops. When Odysseus separates from Agamemnon and the rest of basically the Achaean fleet, they basically what's left of the 1,000 ships after this 9 or 10 year battle, the siege of Troy, they all decide to go home, and they take kind of different routes, and different things happen to them. Some of them make it back to their home islands. Some of them make it back and then are horribly killed. Some of them don't make it back at all. And Odysseus and his crew are the last folks that are sort of unaccounted for in this tale. And the reason is because in the book, they wind up on an island of Cyclopses. Now, the key word is Cyclopses, plural. It is a society, or sort of an anti-society, of these giants with one eye in the middle of their forehead. And the way let's do this. Let's do the split screen. Mark, tell me what happens in the movie on the island of the Cyclops.
So the island of the Cyclops, they end up with a bit of and this is one of the kind of things that I got, and I got to read the source material all the way through because I only know the certain scenes. But there's this rinse, wash, repeat of, hey, island for resources. Hey, scary things. Make a run for the boats. And that's why I labeled this movie the Run for the Boats movie, because it happens at least 3 or 4 times.
I want to point something out there. Like that scene in the trailer that everyone was kind of like, when that was one of the first alarm bells when you hear Matt Damon going, let's go, right? And people are like, that does not sound like 3,000-year-old dialogue. But I thought that was a battle charge. No, that was them running away.
Run away, run away, run away with a rabbit with big, sharp, pointy teeth. No, anyway, as far as the Cyclops goes, so we have our crew. Odysseus separated. Crew is on board. Things are getting a little rough because they're thin on resources. Hey, an island. Let's land on an island. They go to an island. They see some sheep. They were going to kill one sheep. They follow the sheep into a cave. Suddenly there's all these sheep. Hey, oh, wait, we got all these sheep. Wait, where all these sheep come from? And all of a sudden, boom, Cyclops comes in probably, I thought I've seen every Cyclops design so far, from Harryhausen to D&D drawings to, I was wrong. There's another way to do a Cyclops look, which that was a choice. Let's
just say it, Mark, and we're going to keep this as family friendly as possible. It looked like a shaved part of the female anatomy in the middle of this guy's face.
With an eye in the middle. Because
at least it wasn't towards the top.
Because the way they designed this Cyclops is the idea of how our normal eye is, and how a lot of Cyclops, where it's your normal eye, only it's just moved to the middle and you only have one. They turned where the eyelashes and your blink and your eyelid and everything 90 degrees and put it in the middle, which I was like, that's a choice. But in this one, the Cyclops is pretty much nonverbal and doesn't interact with the soldiers at all, outside of discovering a couple of them and eating them right away. And then he locks them away, and then he comes back and they're hiding, and then he falls asleep the first time and they try to escape. I don't know why they didn't just try what they did the second time, and they stab him in the eye. and then he's whining in there, and then he's kind of blinded, and then they try to escape, but he's not blinded enough because he's got enough vision to see them down the mountain. Even after Odysseus, for some reason, they're in the clear, he shoots an arrow again at the Cyclops, completely out of character for this Odysseus. Now, if, like I said, I did the research, the Odysseus, if we would have gotten the Odysseus from the source material, the arrow shooting at the Cyclops as they're leaving would have made more sense than with this Odysseus. It did not make sense. Anyway, Cyclops chases them across the beach, and they get on the boat and leave just before the Cyclops nearly grabs a couple more guys along the way. And that's it. They allude that he could possibly talk because after they've stabbed him once, he's kind of mumbling. But that's about all the interaction is. You do get the scene of them disguising themselves as sheep after they stab him to try to get away. But this plays out different than a society of Cyclops and, well, the pun, which is very smart, which is supposed to show this. Sorry, I don't want to take your thunder. That's your part. But that's what happens in here is it's a single Cyclops. It's a basic encounter. They lose some guys along the way. And there's really no smarts outside of wait till he's asleep and poke him in the eye.
Yeah, and that's an accurate summation of what happens in the movie. And I think when I asked you who the character of Odysseus is, you talked about, he felt responsible for what happened at Troy because it was his idea with the horse and everything. And he's kind of regretful and mopey. The Odysseus from the original poem is not. He's proud of what he's done. He's a trickster. He is inventive and clever. It's kind of the third wheel out of the trio of kings in the Iliad. And the Iliad, for those who don't know, is basically a nearly 500-page fight scene. And it's awesome. It takes place over the course of weeks. And it is one of I got uncomfortable reading some of the descriptions of how they disembowel and murder people in that book. But it was Agamemnon, Achilles, and Odysseus. And they're all trying to get at Troy. And they've got victories and defeats. The gods are a big part of the story. And they're a big part of the story of the Odyssey, but not in Christopher Nolan's film. And we're going to get to that in just a second. But anyway, the idea that Odysseus in Christopher Nolan's imagination has PTSD is a falsity, it's a fabrication, and it also completely changes not only the character, but the meaning of the story and all of the events of the story trickle down from this problem, which is why I say this is not an adaptation of the Odyssey at all. But when Odysseus and his men are in the cave, first of all, they're in there for a while. I think it's a few days.
Right.
And the giant keeps, they're trying to hide and huddle against walls and everything, but the giant keeps grabbing people and just eating them. And it talks to them. And at one point, Odysseus gets the Cyclops drunk, and the Cyclops is like, "What's your name?" And Odysseus famously says, "I am nobody," or "no man." It's been translated in a number of different ways. So later, when Odysseus and his men stab the eye out of the Cyclops, which is beautifully detailed in the book, it's really grotesque. He's flailing around and he's calling out for help, and his neighbor Cyclopses, because this is a society of Cyclopses, not some random dude in a cave with a bunch of sheep. They come and they're kind of banging on the cave door and they're like, "What's going on? Who's hurting you?" And the Cyclops says, "Nobody's hurting me." And they're like, "Then what are you crying about?" And they leave. So he's completely defenseless. Odysseus and his men get out of the cave. They make for the boats. And Odysseus, because he's so full of pride and so proud of what he has done for his entire life as a warrior in the service of the Achaeans, he turns and he shoots the Cyclops. And he says, "My name isn't nobody." I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Right, sure.
"I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, sacker of Troy." So if at the end of the movie, we're supposed to believe that Troy really scarred Odysseus and he's like all ashamed because all these innocent people died. First of all, he spent 10 years trying to take over a city, lost tens of thousands of comrades, soldiers in arms, and friends, and possibly lovers in the prospect. I'm supposed to believe that during that 10 years sitting on a beach fighting people, that he never thought, hey, I wonder what we're going to do if we get inside those walls. I hope everyone's going to be okay. It's stupid.
Yeah, and again, with that, and I didn't have that reference till afterwards, and I was talking to my wife she's very well read. My wife reads a lot of books. She still reads a lot of books, and I read books when I was younger. I just don't get a chance to read a lot.
This is a safe space for people who don't read.
Okay, although, I just like to keep establishing that you know that this is my background. So within the context of the film itself, it's fine. But when I learned about, when she was telling me, and what my son was looking up as well about Odysseus, I thought the choices Nolan made, not only with that, but changing some of the other things, I'm like, that was definitely a creative choice, but I'm not sure why he changed it. Now, I did read an article where he said, oh, well, the nobody scene didn't translate well because if you use the original Greek word for nobody, it means two different things and people wouldn't necessarily understand. And I'm like, I can understand if you had everybody throughout this film speaking Greek the whole time and you had subtitles, then maybe you could get away with the reasoning of, well, this is why I changed this scene. But the fact he could have said nobody and no one would have sat there and go, oh, he didn't use the word Odysseus or whatever it said for, you know, he says his name is nobody. I don't think anybody would have had a problem. What's interesting with Nolan's approach is, and again, I've seen some other fantasy films based on this as well. Yeah. It almost feels like Nolan was trying to thread that needle of presenting this like a historical epic, like historical record, accurate epic groundedness, but still work some of those fantastical elements in there, but not too much of those fantastical elements, except when we get to the pigs. But then he does the pig scene, so I don't understand why you would not, you know, the creative choices he made. And again, that was my biggest issue, and why I wasn't just blown away by this film, was his storytelling in here really did not land with me, because I was just like, if you take away, he shot on 70 millimeter, some of the wonderful cinematography that I'm sure I could enjoy if it was in IMAX or 70 millimeter.
Here's the Mark. I'm just going to say, and not to derail you too much. No. I don't think you're missing out by not seeing this in IMAX, because I think this gets to the limitation of it. There are limitations with filming in the IMAX camera, not just that you have to stop every 3 minutes when in shooting scenes. It's limited in terms of what you can do as far as like movements and capturing vistas. Yeah. This movie is so anti-epic, and I think a lot of that comes back to Nolan's decision to shoot exclusively on IMAX, pretty much for the prestige and just like the kind of the Nolan bros out there, so they can say that, oh yes, our idol was the first person ever to shoot a 3-hour movie on IMAX. I'm like, yeah, but at what cost? He's also like, oh, I don't believe in CG, and that's why at the end of the Trojan War, Odysseus set sail with 3 ships. He had, by some accounts, a dozen with 500 men at his side, which explains why he's going on to these, island adventures. And in the book, you're like, and then he lost another 100 men. Like, how many people were on this trip with him? And it makes it really tragic and even weirder. But because he didn't want to have the aerial shot of a whole bunch of cut and paste CGI Viking battleships, he was like, oh, it's realism. It's just realism. Like, no, it's not at all. Anyhow.
And that's the thing is, it's an interesting choice creatively, because if you think of the Odyssey, no one ever thinks of it as being a grounded historical story. It is a fantasy story. It is the
Greeks do.
Okay.
I understand what you're trying to say, but this gets back to sort of another. There's like 50 sub issues to this film culturally, and the Greeks famously wrote a letter to Nolan saying, we are not happy about what we know of this movie. But this is, to say it's a fantasy, it's kind of like saying to a Christian,
Mhm.
that the Bible is just like it's just made up stories. What are you getting so wrapped up about? The gods and stuff here, it is fantastical, but in terms of the
fantastical is what
historical,
was the word I really meant to say, was not fantasy, but it's a very fantastical story. It is not just it's not a historical book where, okay, on this day in Luxembourg 18 people died, and that's what I mean, is it's not that type of historical contextual story. It's a fantastical story that does have historical, worked into mythology, worked into these other elements, and yet it feels like Nolan was like, well, let's ground it more, let's give it kind of a more realistic type of approach to it. And in doing so, I think he took away some of the opportunities he could have had to really just go creatively. And also, where the small format, while you might not get the epicness, where the small format I think hurts it is because some of the flaws or possibly weaknesses are far more evident in a smaller frame than a bigger frame, because in the bigger frame you've got more to take in. But if you cut in and you've cut a third to a half of your screen and you're focused in the middle of that stuff's blown up, or at least a little bit more obvious, so you can see more. It's you've got to do something more to kind of distract yourself from possibly some of the weaknesses, either visually or even story-wise, because you don't have the grandiose vision to kind of cover over possibly some weaknesses.
That's a fascinating point, because I almost wonder if there's a component of people going to see this in 70 millimeter and IMAX, because for the comparative handful of theaters that are showing it in these formats across the country, they are literally running round the clock screenings.
Yeah.
And they're all selling out. So you can pay $30 for one ticket to go see this movie at 2:45 in the morning. So you almost want to not have to tell yourself, yeah, that wasn't that great. I paid a lot of money to see this. It's sweeping. It's epic. It's everything. Every cliche. I want to have a T-shirt that just says Odyssey bingo with all the kind of hack critic,
masterpiece. I did not use the M masterpiece. Again, I enjoyed a lot of the other aspects, but it was the story itself that really, there's a few sections, maybe a handful, I can count on one hand, where I kind of started to get emotionally invested, or a little tension, or a little something moving for me.
Let's talk about that.
But then it went fleeting, well, near the end.
No. I'm sorry, Mark, I gotta do this for your own good, to save your eardrums, much like the screams of the Cyclops in the cave. If you lead off with the emotional moment being that damn dog Argos.
No, I'm not. No, I was going to talk. I wasn't going to talk about the dog Argos. I was talking about where at the end we get the really good monologue. And again, I said this is one of the better performances by Damon. I'm not necessarily saying that his character was great, but I think one of his better you can really feel him trying and putting himself into this character, for me anyway. But he's having this discussion where he's posing as a beggar, and he's talking to his wife, and he's talking about all the flaws and things that the Odysseus of the past that she knew has learned along his journeys. And it's his humble speech. It's like, you know what? Yeah, I really was a dick before. But we never got that on screen. But apparently he's been a very big dick, because mostly we've gotten him making sacrifice for his men and actually carrying this weight and burden. So we never get that other side that he apparently has. But he's making this confession, and it's a setup because his son, who's never really met him, played by Tom Holland, is under threat by one of the suitors, played by Robert Pattinson. And we get the scene while he's giving this monologue. We get Pattinson going to go possibly kill, the prince, Odysseus' son, not realizing the beggar was Odysseus at first. But the way Nolan cuts this scene kept removing some emotional beats that I was in, because Damon's putting his all into this monologue. Okay, you could tell he's done, and you get this nice quiet moment. Anne Hathaway stealing every scene she's in, trying to, but it's an emotional moment, and you get a nice little chunk of dialogue. Then we cut to Pattinson pulling the knife possibly out, and then we cut to the prince sitting around the fire, with the blind shepherd who's their family friend, and then we cut back to this emotional monologue. And then we cut back to Robert Pattinson pulling the knife out again, not moving forward, not doing anything, just pulling the knife out again and waiting for his opportunity, which is across this very large room. And then we cut back. And maybe that's where the IMAX, because I forgot about, you could only shoot about 3 to 4 minutes at a time on IMAX before because it's all film and it's big and it's huge. And that makes sense, because even in his conversations with Calypso, there's cut. We barely get any actual beats of longer than 3 minutes of emotional character to give you a chance to maybe take in whatever they're trying to convey in that scene, because then we cut and then we cut and then we, and it was very evident on our screen, the cuts, because it took me away from the conversations, because I'm like, quit cutting.
Mark, I think you might have missed something there that Nolan, in all of his cleverness, did. He kind of made a meta commentary on his translation of the Odyssey from page to screen, with Pattinson going like this, and then this, and then this.
I was not saying that. Do not put words in my mouth. No.
No, I'm just saying, I think you're onto something. I think I want to talk about Cersei.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get back to Calypso.
Sure.
Who I think was one of the better elements of this movie, because it's Charlize Theron, but they even screwed that up.
Okay.
But Cersei, okay, we'll do the thing again. Mark, who is Cersei, and how does Odysseus encounter her in the film?
Cersei,
Pig lady.
The pig lady. Yes, the pig lady. He encounters her after. So they get to yet another island. They get off the island again, looking for resources again. Only this time his men want a mutiny, which doesn't seem to faze him one bit when his team says, yeah, we really kind of want to leave you on an island. And he's just like, it's almost like in one ear out the other. He's like, okay, well, you guys go up into the hill and find resources. I'm going to go hunt this way, and I'll make sure you guys eat. And I'm like, your crew just said they don't want you to lead anymore. And rather than taking a moment to maybe have some conversation or back and forth, he's just like, yeah, I almost wanted him to say, yeah, that tracks. And then he goes off, and then I was waiting for him to say it and go off into the field. And then his men go up and meet Cersei, and his men, who are been trained by him, and you would hope be fairly smart soldiers. I understand they're desperate, they're hungry and whatnot, but they're there. She thinks the soldiers are going to hurt her. They're like, no, we're, Odysseus men. We don't do that. And so she get in, and then she goes, well, put your armor and weapon out in the back. So as they're putting their armor and weapon out in the back, there's this field of old armor and weapon. And I don't know, but if I'm even half of a soldier, I'm going to go, guys, I'm going to go wait back in the car.
Oh, maybe she works in metals. That's kind of cool. We like metal.
Maybe I just go back to the car. Okay, but whatever. So they go in there, they eat the food, they eat the meat, and they turn into the pigs, much like in,
Well, this is one of the more, this is what's so frustrating, is this is one of the more enjoyable for horror fans moments in the film, because they're almost possessed as they're eating this stuff. They're getting more and more riled up and more animalistic. And she comes around and starts kind of stroking their hair, and then pulling back their foreheads to reveal these pig ears, and getting her fingers into their mouth and breaking things open. It's amazing, but it has nothing to do with the Odyssey.
Right. And I realized this part was probably not in the Odyssey, but I will say the segment where she's because I knew it was coming that they were going to eat the food and turn into pigs. I'm like, oh, this is the pig story. I forgot that it was the name Cersei, the witch, that had done it, but nonetheless, I knew that scene was coming. I was like, okay, this is that scene. Okay, they're just going to turn into pigs, kind of a la like American Werewolf in London type of, but they don't. She does this really cool hand thing to where it starts changing them. And I loved that whole segment for me where she pulling their snouts, like forming these guys into pigs, like the meat they ate made them malleable to her. And I'm like, that's really cool. I enjoyed that part, whether it's in the Odyssey or not. I thought that was handled really done well visually for the horror fan I am. I'm like, I've not seen this in a horror film. I'm like, this is done really well, and then Odysseus is out and he's hunting and he finds a deer and he shoots it because, he's a master hunter. And then he finds the body of the human that was the deer that he shot him. I don't know if that's in the book.
No.
And then he goes up the path looking for his men that went that way. And he sees a really good lion. And then he sees a cheetah. And then he sees a panther that would have had even Neil Breen going, dude, no, don't include that. No, that's rough, man. Because that panther that they put in there was really composited. I'm like, what, how did this get past anybody? Because this is not, the cheetah alone kind of looked janky. And then there was a lynx or whatever. And then those looked, the lion looked good, but everything else, like, you didn't need those others, but whatever. Anyway, he goes up and the pigs are in the pen and he realizes this, something is up with this witch. And that's when he interacts with her. And he convinces her to turn his men back by threatening to kill a crow, which is her sister. And they have some dialogue. And then they go from there, run back to the boats.
No, well, they don't run back to the boats. They're sent.
Okay, they walk this time, yeah,
because they're sent to Hades,
right?
On a mission.
But they had to walk back to the boat. They didn't run though. They walked back.
Right. This is the one time
she sends them to Hades. She sends them to Hades, saying, "Yeah, good luck, guys. You want to? Okay, go to Hades."
All right. So, do you know what happens in the book or the poem? Okay. Prepare to have your damn mind blown, Mark.
Okay.
This kind of gets back to one of the problems of there not being any gods in this movie. And when I say any gods, I mean any gods. Now, if you haven't seen the Odyssey yet, you might be thinking, but wait a second, Zendaya plays Athena. Zendaya plays Athena the same way that Emerald Fennell put quotes around Wuthering Heights. Anyhow, back to Cersei. The men go off. It's not a mutiny. Odysseus says, hey, you guys go up and see what that's that smoke that's come out of that place on the top of the mountain. They go up there. They hear beautiful song coming from inside this. I don't remember if it was described as a castle, but it's not really a hovel because Cersei has servants. She's like kind of hermit royalty.
Mm-hmm.
They go in, they see this gorgeous woman, this gorgeous young woman who is a seductress, and she invites them in and she feeds them, and then she turns them into pigs, and then they go into their pen. Right. There's none of this like engorged dinner scene or anything like that. I think it's literally like then she turned them into pigs and they went off. Odysseus kind of gets worried because his men have been gone for a while. So he goes up to investigate and he encounters a god on the way. I don't remember if it was Hermes. There's a few gods that show up in this, like minor deities. To give messages and occasionally help. And let's just say it's Hermes. He says, hey, I know you want to go into that house. Just be careful because there's some bad stuff going on there. And here, eat this. And he's like, what? Or drink it. Or he gives him basically this potion to protect him against what he's going to find in there. And he goes in and he has the conversation with Cersei, and basically he says, what have you done to my men? And she's like, well, yeah, I'll change him back. They do end up going to Hades, because she says in order to help get back home, you need, I can't remember why she knows this because it's been like a week or two since I read this part of it. But essentially, you've got to go to Hades to talk to this blind prophet who's down there, who's going to basically tell you how everything in the rest of this story is going to go, your destiny. Are you going to get home? If so, what are you going to face to get there? And what are you going to face when you get there? He's like, okay, cool. Mark, how long do you think it takes for him to go to have that conversation to go to Hades?
In the book?
In the book, yeah.
I would have thought it was going to be like weeks journey or years or something, or a long time.
Well, I mean, from the time they have that agreement where she turns the men back to the time when she says, "Hey, you need to go to Hades to figure out the rest of your journey."
Oh, how long that part is?
Yeah.
I don't know. In the book, a few minutes, maybe. I don't know.
A year. Because Circe falls in love with Odysseus, and they hang out and screw for a year.
Oh, so his men stay a pig for a year?
No, they get to.
He got turned back, but okay,
they got turned back, but she basically keeps them. It's sort of almost a prelude to what happens with Calypso. But yeah, so a year later, and according to some of I did a little bit of like extra Odyssey research, meaning research outside the Odyssey.
Sure.
I guess in some tellings, they actually had 3 children together. So in the film, and this is one detail that you left out, and this is where I really started to get a sour taste in my mouth. And this is one of the reasons I said that this is a blatantly misandrous movie, which, there are misogynists who hate women and misandrists hate men. In the film, Samantha Morton, she's like everybody else in this movie. She gives a really strong performance to a good performance for the character as written. But this is not the Circe that appears in the book, because at the end, as Odysseus is getting more and more into what happened with the men and the pigs, he's like, "You turned my men into pigs?" And she's like, "Yes." And he said, "But why? They were just seeking shelter and food. They wouldn't have done anything to you, or they didn't attack you, did they?" And she said, "No, but they would have, because they're men, Mark." Well, and then later, when she's turning them back into men, she's yelling, "Get back in your costumes, get back in your costumes," because they're changing from pigs back into men. Do you get it? Because all men are pigs, Mark. It's one of the most, and you know what? You can have that opinion, but it's the same thing as an overtly misogynist scene in a movie where you're telling, like, you know what? I think all women deserve to be back in the kitchen.
But it is implied when they first meet her past experience on why she may feel that way. So in defense of that, in her perspective from that is how at least she sees them, because especially with the amount of armor that is laying out in the backyard, she has had other folks on her shore, and she may be dealing with that, and has, because of her past experiences, that's how she is feeling. I didn't take that as the movie saying that specifically, as just her character due to her past experiences, and especially with her reaction when she first sees Odysseus's men.
Yes, and that is a fabrication of the film, because she is a very powerful sorceress, and she also has, in the novel, a full staff of people. So it's not like she's this, and even that logic doesn't make sense, because if she has this ability to cast spells and deceive people and all this other stuff, why would she be afraid of a bunch of dudes showing up at her doorstep? And on top of that, why are we to believe that she's ever had a positive opinion of men, and not just stopped them in their tracks and had this, excuse? That's not really established in the film, and it's certainly not a part of the Odyssey story. Now, I understand wanting to put that in there, but you really have to back that up, because it's an ugly thing to say that, you know what, you could take this to race. On Jerry Springer decades ago, he used to have white supremacists on, and I remember this one, fiery ginger girl who bragged about having World War II memorabilia all over her house, if you know what I mean. And I think it was Springer said, like, "What happened to you?" And she's like, "Well, I had a bad experience with a couple of black guys once." And then he's like, and that did it, huh? That just set you on this path, huh? And she's like, yeah, that's all it took. And that's the morality that we're dealing with here, allegedly.
Well, I mean, I think it's more than just a couple of folks with her trauma and whatnot. But likewise, you can't likewise I mean, you can take both sides of that coin, though. You can say, yes, we aren't given the impression that she's ever thought of men positively, but we can also give the impression that she's never had a positive experience with men. So her negative experience is, I can see where that would be coming from and where she would have that. So, I mean, it's,
that's true. That is a valid emotion to have, but it does not give her the right to transform men into beasts, especially when they come in, they haven't done anything. I mean, for all the talk about Zeus's law, and we should probably establish that.
Please.
Because that is a thing that completely gets turned around and butchered in this movie. And it's one of the reasons that we're led to believe that Odysseus is being punished for this entire thing, not because of the blinding of the Cyclops, who was Poseidon's, I don't know if I said, I think I left that part of the story out of the.
We left it out
story
completely. The Cyclops is Poseidon's son, which is
right. So, but I think I got distracted when I was telling that story about how Odysseus was bragging about who he was. I got hung up on that, anti-war jag. The point of that in the book was that he shot an arrow back at the Cyclops, bragged about who he was, revealed who he was, and then the Cyclops prays to his father Poseidon and says, "Dad, Odysseus, he blinded me." And then Poseidon's like, well, no one does that to my son. And he vows to make the rest of his journey home extremely difficult. And that's why he's on this series of misadventures. Right. Now, there is the concept of Zeus's law, which is that you need to be kind to strangers and offer them all the hospitality you can, because you never know if one of them is going to be a god in disguise. Because in the reality of Homer's world, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, gods walked among people, not just like, oh, we're hanging out at Olympus. They did that too, but they would regularly come down disguised as regular people, sometimes not disguised as people. They're just kind of like enjoying the fray, which would have been amazing to see realized on film. But it's sort of like a version of the golden rule, except not doing unto others as you would have them do to you, because it's just the right thing to do, but because you're afraid that these extremely petulant and arrogant gods are going to be offended by something and wipe out your entire lineages with a lightning bolt or a giant wave. Now, Circe completely violates Zeus's law and is not really punished at all. She's admonished. I mean, she has to give away her, captors. She gets to turn them back into pigs. But all throughout this story, where it's being told about like the horrible like guilt that Matt Damon feels because of this giant violation, but the Cyclops breaks the law. Circe breaks the law. To a certain extent, Calypso maybe, but she does offer hospitality. But that's a whole other story we'll get to. Anyhow, yeah. But my point is. I don't really care what someone's past experience is. I can be empathetic towards it, but when it translates into action of like assaulting people who, just on sight or because of who they are or what they are, I can't get behind that at all.
I mean, that's fair enough. I see your point. I'm just saying that, I think that's what they were trying to go for. So, I mean, it's definitely, I can see both sides of it. I guess for me, like I said, I took it as that she hadn't really had enough positive, if any, experiences, at least on the island as herself, to where she would have had a positive opinion. Whether or not, that's what you're supposed to do, that is what I think is what they were going for with her. Yeah. And so, and I again, empathetic about it. And is the actions right? Well, you should give everyone the benefit of the doubt, but after you take however many, like I said, there's a lot of armor on that island. So depending on how excessive, she ended up getting that, experience, I can also see how her reaction would be that way. Whether it's a right reaction or wrong reaction, I can see where it was coming from, on that angle of what it could be. But either way, it's not explained, because we don't get a dialogue about her past experiences, or we get an insight into what she may have experienced in the past. We are presented at this moment in time. And so, that's where I can see where you're coming from for your, how you're feeling about it, is the fact that we aren't kind of given that either. But the fact of what you described as how she was in the book, for me, would have, I'm thinking, made it far more interesting visual. But then again, it would do something which I'm not sure fits with Nolan's vision of who Odysseus is in his movie.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the problem is, again, I don't think you can have the Circe character in Nolan's world falling in love with Odysseus and all this stuff. I mean, and that's the kind of the problem that I have with his treatment of the female characters in this movie is he completely changes them around to be not cunning, not sinister. He kind of reserves a lot of that for the men folk. I mean, the one who comes out the most unscathed is Penelope, and we'll get to her in just a bit. But yeah, with Circe, she's changed from an enchantress, beautiful witch, to this, kind of a pseudo only defending myself victim. With Calypso, who we kind of he that's where we meet Odysseus when the movie begins. He's been on this island with Charlize Theron as Calypso, and there's no context given in this movie. She's just this chick that he washed up on her island, and she's been feeding him these flowers that are basically roofies for the last 7 years because he doesn't remember wanting to go back home. So when we first catch up with him, he has been drugged and he's got amnesia kind of. And over the course of the film, as he's kind of recounting his, trying to remember, what he's alive for, she takes him off of the lotus flower, and he eventually gets on the way back to Ithaca. Now, in the novel, I keep calling it a novel, it's a poem, but it's a giant thick book made of 24 books,
in the book
chapters.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll call it the book. First of all, there is an island of lotus eaters, and these are basically just people who have this lotus plant, and it's all they do is sit around all day doing drugs. And a number of Odysseus's men, they start eating the lotus plant and getting high, and they decide that they don't want to leave. They forget what they're trying to do, and Odysseus has to drag them back to the ship, like kind of kicking and screaming, and basically have them detox and be like, no, we're going home. They combine that with the Calypso character, and what's so frustrating is there's a great through line that almost isn't in the Odyssey as explicitly, but Nolan could have really done something here and showing the devolving of Odysseus's crew from like these loyal, proud warriors who conquered this city after 10 years, making their way home, and the morale gradually dropping and dropping and dropping. When he's saving his people from the Lotus Eaters and kind of like getting them back into shape, later on in the story, there is the mutiny that happens on that last island where all of his men get wiped out because they eat the sacred cattle.
Right.
But there's a lot of kind of room in there with all the things that they go through, being turned into pigs, being waylaid for 7 years on this. Well, no, the Calypso thing was the very end. All the men were dead by that point.
Right.
Because the cattle, Nolan plays with time, Homer plays with time, and then they're playing with time conflicts butt up against each other. So I can't remember which way is up or down. It's like Inception. But anyhow, in the poem, Calypso, she basically drugs or coerces Odysseus, kind of the same effect as the lotus flowers, but it's not exactly the same. He spends all of his days looking out at the ocean, like pining for his family, but then at night she forces him to sleep with her. Now you might say, but it's Charlize Theron. That sounds like 7 awesome years. Except it's completely against his will. It's a real Wonder Woman 1984 situation. It's not good. But in the film, there's no hint that she's a goddess or that she has any kind of power except for these drugs that somehow she's able to manufacture this lotus plant on what looks to be kind of a desert island. And then she just lets him go. In the poem, it's the intervention of, I believe it was Athena, who basically said, okay, Calypso, cut it out.
Mhm.
We got to move this along. He's going to get back to his family. He's like, but I don't wanna. And
well, he does refer to Calypso at one point as a demigod, but it's a single line, and
right.
that's one of the things. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but it's just the Calypso thing. I couldn't help but just jump back to Pirates of the Caribbean, which then my brain afterwards was just, I was taking this exact same story, but putting the crew of the Black Pearl in place of the crew of Odysseus, and them going through the exact same situations. I'm going, oh, that's an amazing movie right there. The pirates doing, but anyway, I actually like the story with Calypso and Odysseus and what kind of starts coming to light. And he does call her a demigod. But again, this is Nolan playing with, I'm too afraid to really lean into the mythological stuff, but I know I've got to put the mythological stuff in here. So I'm just going to put this kind of grounded concept or context of mythological stuff in here. So it's still the mythology. You'll recognize it, but at the same time, it's not on another level. We never actually see the gods. We just hear booming, either thunder in the air, or we hear people talk about Poseidon, and we see the ocean start giving Odysseus' crew shit. But that's, pardon my friends, sorry, but giving them a rough time. But that's about it as far as actual gods appearing. And they drop that she is a demigod. And I am familiar with Calypso, not just from her, but also Pirates of the Caribbean. I knew she was at least a very powerful being of the ocean, not necessarily god level, but demigod. Like she got some serious power behind her,
right? But in this version, I don't remember the demigod line. But you.
Oh yeah, he does. He does. Yeah, near the end.
Yeah. But near the end of his time with her, or the end of
when as the conversations come to surface and he starts to remember more and she starts letting up, he does drop the demigod line. I forgot how the context, but it's making in reference to a demigod, but it's very brief. But I believe he'd say it.
Well, and that's the kind of the strange relationship this movie has with mythology, spirituality, or whatever. Because if he did drop that line, I would imagine that he's still like the effects of this drug are wearing off.
Mm-hmm.
So the Greeks in this movie are religious in the same way that people often talk about, like the Egyptians with the sun god. Like, oh, they thought that a god put the sun up in the sky, so they just called that that's their deity. That's about as much god action as we get in this. As you mentioned, the roiling storms of the sea, you've got the lightning strikes. Now, someone might say, oh, looks like Zeus is mad at us. But in the context of Homer's Odyssey, the poem, you see Zeus, you hear him arguing with people, you see the squabbles, you see Poseidon, you feel all of this stuff going on, and you know that the people down below, because they've had these interactions with these deities, they believe this wholeheartedly. When Odysseus says, well, then I defy the gods, no, that is not that is not in the character. I mean, they're I assume were atheists, if you wanted to call them back in the time, but those are not the heroes of Homer's epic, partially because Odysseus spent 10 years fighting the Trojan War alongside and against gods, so he would know what's going on. He would also know that you cannot defy these creatures. He's constantly in the book making sacrifices to, like, full-on sacrifices, like on his boats, and basically wherever he gets off port, he's kind of praying or offering some kind of an animal slaughter or a burnt offering. I mean, it's a very spiritual text, and to see it just kind of boiled down to this sub-essence it's insulting, but it also robs you of the potential fantasy of this movie. Nolan was the wrong person to make this film.
Well, and I think that's where you put it on the head, is, again, robbing you of the actual fantastical stuff. It was like he was very afraid to lean into the fantastical, when I would love to see a Nolan I was hoping he would go like Clash of the Titans. I mean, Clash of the Titans is more of a story of Odysseus than this is in many respects. You know,
did we watch that? That was for the
we watched that. Yeah,
was that this year? Or was that last year?
That was last year, I think.
Okay,
we did that
because I think that was the first time I'd watched it. And
no, that was the beginning of this year. That was the beginning of this year. We were looking at that because we looked at dark fantasy films.
That's right. But the scenes in, on Olympus, like this movie made me appreciate those so much more.
Where the gods are arguing with Zeus, and Zeus like, yeah, no, you're doing my will, and you've got people working behind his back, and okay, he's going to do that, but I found a loophole in what Zeus said, so we're going to do this and help or hinder Perseus. And I was hoping for some of those moments, even if you don't have big, grandiose Olympus, even if you had the gods come down as a person like they do with Athena, Zendaya's character, and sitting with him and appearing to him and giving him, at least tidbits of advice or, guidance or whatever, or arguing with him. I was kind of hoping for more of those moments, but you don't get those. And then you get moments that, and I said this in my review, I'm like, I wish the most interesting moments of this journey weren't put in the trailer, because nearly the 3 or 4 instances that are actually fantastical, the Cyclops, the big metal armor guys, I have no idea who those guys are. All of that are in the trailer even. So in a number of scenes. So when they show up here, I'm like, oh, that's this part. And I was hoping for more context of that part, especially the guys with the armor who are lay wasting to Odysseus's men. But there's no mention of who or what they're just guys in armor. They could control the woods, and they like annihilate a third of Odysseus's men.
Well, and that's the not the Lystrians. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's a really long line. It's Lystrian Goyans or something. It's a very long word.
Oh, sorry, it's the Lystrigonians. Thank you.
Lystrigonians. Yeah, thank you.
It's been a long day, but and we're talking about a Greek movie. What are we doing here, Mark? Anyhow,
I've been up since 3, so
nice.
2:30 actually.
Oh my gosh. Well, we'll get you out of here in the next half hour or so. Anyway,
we're good.
Because we still have to talk about Athena and Penelope.
There's still a lot. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I want to say that whole thing with the Lystrigonians was weird because, and here's where I think a lot of this stuff could have been done in montage, maybe even humorous montage, but Nolan doesn't really have a funny bone, which is kind of a problem. But the Lystrigonian chapter or the episode is very brief. And it's basically like they come ashore. Odysseus is like, let's go check out this place. And they come to this, like, from what I remember, like this little kingdom of people. And they realize very quickly that they're a race of cannibals. And they're like, run away back to the ships.
Run away.
But they are not people who show up in, they're not like 19-foot Krull giants wearing plate armor that wouldn't be around for another 1,000 years. I don't know. I get it's fantasy, but again, Nolan, you want your cake and eat it too. You talk about, we did all this research to keep things accurate, and yet there are 3 F-bombs in this movie, Mark.
There are 3 F-bombs in this movie, which surprised me at the time.
Yeah, the first time I'm like, oh well, I guess, and the second time, then the second and third time are like rapid succession because it's like the repeating of the line is like crazy. Anyhow, let's get back to Ithaca. That's where Odysseus is trying to get home to. Penelope, his wife, his queen, has been stuck in this palace with her son Telemachus, who is now I think he's supposed to be about 21 years old.
Yeah,
because they left for the war 20 years ago, took 10 years to fight, and it's 10 years to get back on the Odyssey. So Telemachus never knew his dad. He only heard kind of stories of him. And in the book, Odysseus doesn't. Nolan kind of does it here, but not really. Screws it all up along with everything else. In the book, the first 4 chapters are about Telemachus and Penelope, and their house has been infested with suitors from various different kingdoms who are like, well, Odysseus's kingdom is kind of up for grabs, and we get to, marry Penelope. She's kind of hot and awesome, and then we can get all these resources. She just has to pick one of us. And there are 108 people taking up residence in this castle, including suitors and their kind of their servants and all this other
Their
stuff.
hanger-ons and other things, yeah.
Right. And they're drinking all the food, drinking all the wine, eating all the food, or drinking all the food, abusing Telemachus, kind of bullying him. The Telemachus of the book is he's uncertain of his ability to take on a bunch of suitors, but he is not Tom Holland. He is not Peter Parker. I'm sorry. The only thing I'm going to say about Elliot Page's casting as Sinon in this, because there's been a lot of talk about that, and there's so much, and we've talked about this for over an hour, so much to critique about the Odyssey that doesn't even come in like 26th. Okay. But I think Tom Holland would have been a better choice for the Sinon role. Because he's supposed to be this like naive young kid, I guess, in the Christopher Nolan logic. But then if you extrapolate that out, how do you get to be still wiry and sinewy and like kind of innocent looking after you've spent 10 years fighting a war on a beach, living out of a boat? No, you're either dead or you're jacked beyond all belief. Anyhow, back to these suitors. We've got Altinous. I keep forget, because in the book I kept thinking his name was Altinous, but it's Altinous, played by Robert Pattinson. He's sort of the ringleader, and he's the one most vying for control. He's very cunning, very arrogant, and very mean. And he has recently found out that Penelope, one of the reasons she's been able to hold all these people off is she's weaving a funereal shroud. And the idea is once she finishes the shroud, she will pick a suitor. She's been working on this thing for years. And eventually, I think one of the servants, played by Mia Goth, kind of tips off Robert Pattinson because they're sleeping together. She's like, yeah, at night when you guys all leave or pass out, she undoes all of her weaving and then she starts over again in the morning. So she'll never finish it. And they're like, well, that's not on. So make a choice. And so it's really a ticking clock as to when Odysseus is going to come back. Telemachus takes a small crew and leaves to find Menelaus, who was one of Odysseus's men-at-arms and also Agamemnon's brother, and also the husband of Helen. So Telemachus goes to Menelaus for word of his father. Now, what happens in the movie, Mark?
Well, they try to pose as servants, and well, I mean, that shows you the naivety of the kid, because it's just like, oh yeah, you're Odysseus's kid. Yeah, sit down, have a good. They're just like, who the fuck are you? Who are you fooling, man? He's like, I've served, Agamemnon. That's my brother. I know Odysseus. No, you're his kid. Okay, so he gets called out real quick, and we do find out that what's his name also ended up, I don't know if it's something happened. He did something to Helen of Troy to disfigure part of her face. Yeah. Because she's back with him. And then,
well, that's the implication in the movie, and it's a very cruel joke. Clever, but cruel, because Menelaus and Telemachus and Helen are sitting at a big banquet, and Menelaus is kind of talking about what happened. Now, for those of you who don't know, the story of Helen of Troy is that Paris, who was a Trojan, there are a couple of different ways the story has been told. One is that he seduced Helen and she ran away with him. The mythological explanation, though, is that Paris was promised the most beautiful woman in the world as a reward for him giving something to one of the gods.
Right. Yeah.
That happened to be Helen.
I knew that part.
Right. So he shows up basically at her house, quote unquote, when Menelaus is away, and takes her back to Troy. And Menelaus is like, no, And then Helen, because of her amazing beauty, she becomes the face that launched 1,000 ships, thus beginning the Trojan War, the assault on Troy.
Right.
In the movie, Helen is back with Menelaus as she is in the book, but in the book, she's, they're kind of happy. You get the sense that they might not be as happy as they were when they first met, but Helen is very much, she's dignified. She helps out Telemachus. I think gives him a cloak or something on the way home and kind of wishes him well. She's in the story for like very briefly. In the movie, they're at this banquet, and Menelaus says, because this is what's his face, the Punisher. Why am
Barenthal.
Yeah, John Bernthal, right? He says, the face that launched 1,000 ships. He takes Helen's like head in his chin in her hands, and then turns her face towards the camera, and it's a total Tim Burton Batman moment. And you see the turn of the face that's all beautiful, and then it's scarred on one side, and he says, maybe 500. So we're supposed to believe that he disfigured Helen of Troy. That's not in the literature. That's not, to my knowledge, ever mentioned or implied. Now, from what I understand of the story, during the sacking of Troy, Menelaus did want to kill Helen because of the betrayal. But once he saw her, he was kind of enchanted by her beauty and kind of like said, well, just come back home. We'll figure this out. And they, quote unquote, lived happily ever after, I guess. So again, this is just another weird movie to say, because Menelaus is a guy and he's prideful and he's a violent beast, he's going to take his wife back and rough her up a bit and then keep her as a trophy. And once again, I did not appreciate the implication.
Well, and I didn't imply that, but I took it more as she may have gotten injured during the raid on Troy, but I didn't.
That's a Gumby-esque stretch, Mark.
It's still,
because here's the thing. The way he said it when he turned her face, he was admiring his own handiwork. And that comment is not something you say when it's like, oh, my poor wife, she was tragically disfigured during that assault, or I feel guilty about it. Is like, yeah, she's not going to be launching 1,000 ships anytime soon.
He didn't feel guilty about it that she got injured because she ran away with what's his nuts too. So it could be that. I didn't read. I can see how it can be taken, how you're saying it for sure. But for me, I didn't. I had assumed maybe she got injured in the war and that he's making a joke of it because he's still bitter that she ran off with what's his name. So,
well, we can agree to disagree, and I think part of the problem is that Nolan doesn't really take a stand as to what that situation was. Was she kidnapped, or did she, go willingly, or was it a combination of both? Some kind of enchantment. Because again, because there are no gods in this movie, I would think that disfiguring the most beautiful woman in the world, who herself was the product of a divine, parentage, would trigger something. I don't think he would dare do that in a world where Zeus actually exists. And on top of that, he would have understood that a lot of this stuff is fated. So probably she didn't have a choice. Right. Because if the gods have this story to tell and they promise Paris something, Paris is going to get it. So let's move on to, we'll kind of jump ahead. I know John Leguizamo plays Eumaeus, who's the sheep herd.
I liked him in this.
I didn't. And I think a lot of it comes down to, again, the performance is okay, except he in particular sticks out like a sore thumb because he still sounds like John Leguizamo.
Okay,
he still sounds like the damn ferret or whatever he is in Ice Age without quite as much.
Well, see, I forgot Ice Age. You had to bring it up. Thank you. I totally blocked that entire series out of my head.
He's Amadeus. I'm blind. Anyhow, the weird thing about this is that Nolan peppers him throughout the entire movie. Like we see him in flashback, we see him hang out at the house, with Penelope and Telemachus and all that stuff, or Telemachus. In the book, he doesn't show up until almost the very end, when he's the first person that Odysseus encounters, and they spend a lot of time out in this guy's kind of servants' quarters, sort of in the country, and the castle is, up the hill, if you kind of imagine the geography. And he nurses Odysseus back to health, and kind of Odysseus gradually reveals himself to this. Telemachus is coming back from his quest with Menelaus, and he comes upon Eminus's house, and there's this grand, like, you can just feel the father and son
connection
slowly coming together and meeting under this guy's roof. And it's, it's a beautiful reunion, and you really get a sense for them plotting revenge against these suitors. And it takes its time, and there's a big buildup to this massacre, which is, did you ever see the red wedding scene from Game of Thrones?
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes. I thought that was fantastic. Yeah, I mean, brutal, don't get me wrong, horrible, but I mean, as far as storytelling goes, them actually portraying that, it is a very effective scene. That's supposed to be, because that's a turning point in the books, from my understanding. So,
and that, I'm not saying that George R.R. Martin got that from this, but he probably did, because as described in the source material, this was the red wedding of Homer. And that whole nonsense that Nolan interjects into the film, where Alcinous sends that group of kind of like vagabonds out to ambush Telemachus and I think Mentor in a temple.
Yeah, they cut them off at, they pose as priests in the temple where everybody is praying.
And
that is one of the better fight scenes, actually, where you actually get to see how Odysseus is actually a warrior in that one, I think. But anyway, I like that action scene, actually. But
and that's the problem, I think, with this adaptation, is you think it's a good action scene, and it's okay. It's like a lot of the action scenes in this movie. Nolan still does not really know how to choreograph action in a way that is exciting, except sometimes accidentally. But the violence in this movie is very PG-13. It's G compared to what's in the book. But
I can't believe I know why they probably gave this an R, but when I was watching it, I'm like, there's very much a lack of blood for this to be an R.
I honestly, I think it's the 3 F-bombs, because you're only allowed one in a PG-13.
Yeah, it's got to be the 3 F-bombs, I'm thinking, because everything else I'm watching this going, wasn't this supposed to be R?
But anyway, those assassins, they're sent out in a ship, and they're hiding out in a cove, waiting for Telemachus to come back from Menelaus's kingdom, and they're going to intercept, ambush, and murder him. But I think it was Athena who advised Telemachus to take a different route, because she knew about the ambush. And so there's a very kind of comical scene at the end of towards the end of the book, where the suitors are like, well, you won't have to worry about Telemachus anymore, because he's out of the picture. And then all of a sudden the vagabonds show up, and they're like, I don't know where he went, boss. And then Telemachus, I think, shows up with Odysseus, and they're like, oh no. Anyhow, the end of this is the famous scene with the 12 axes lined up. Penelope says, whoever can shoot this arrow through these 12 axes, first they have to string Odysseus's bow, which no one else can do. I was really bothered by the fact that they set this up at the beginning of the movie, because like everything else in this, with the way Nolan jumps around in time, he telegraphs everything that you're about to see in the beginning of the movie. Whereas when you're reading the poem, there's all these great surprises waiting for you towards the end of the book. When you think about, oh, it's just this kind of like several pages of these conversations in this hut between the shepherd and the dad and Telemachus and all this stuff. But then he starts dropping these little things like, oh, that's kind of a cool idea. And oh, it's an interesting conversation with Penelope, and a lot of kind of like convincing Penelope that Odysseus is who he is and not just this beggar. There's also an element of Athena physically, magically transforming Odysseus, like shrinking his body and making him into a decrepit old man. And then later, when he comes out to the suitors, he kind of hulks out in front of them, and they're like, oh my God, we are dead.
Yeah.
None of that's in this thing. But so there's the contest with the axes. Odysseus reveals himself, by shooting the arrow through. Now, Altinous, the ringleader, he's the first one to get it in the book when the mayhem starts.
Oh, really?
But it's his friend who played, I think, Dr. Dre in Straight Outta Compton years ago. Fine actor, but it bothered me that he gets the arrow in the neck. That's supposed to be Altinous. You're supposed to like cut the head out the snake, and then everyone else
freaks out because you got him. He was the guy that told us to do this. He's gone. What the hell are we going to do?
Right. Plus in the book, it's more like the Wild Bunch, where it's like Emmaus, Odysseus, Telemachus, and there's a third person. I'm blanking on who it is, but it's like the four of them up against
start
the scooters.
wasting guys. Yeah.
Right. And there's this whole plan where they steal all of the weapons and the armament subtly of the people, and they put it into this storeroom. They kind of do an idea of it here, but it's like Penelope announcing like, oh, take all their shields and put them away. Right. It's Penelope's idea to trap everybody in the room and kill them all. There's this whole speech. And again, this gets back to this bizarre misandry moment, which I get it, but it's a totally 2026 or 2016 idea of the way people thought, at least according to Homer. Penelope is like yelling at Telemachus because he's like, well, Dad's hopefully coming home. And she's like, well, he's got to come home because I don't want to marry these suitors. And then he's like, well, I could be king. He's like, yeah, you could be king because you're the man. I've been sitting on that throne for, 20 years and no one cares about me. I'm like, yeah, because that's what, women did back then. Women of leisure, they were taken care of. They lived in their castles, and for fun, they wove stuff. There was none of this, like, not everyone was Black Widow or the strong, empowered female heroine type. And they weren't like a lot of Xena warrior princesses back then. Now, I get it. It might be kind of weird to watch this in 2026, but if you're uncomfortable with that being the reality of the time, at least as portrayed in the source material, for very important reasons, don't make this movie. I mean, Penelope, she was cunning and she was loyal and she was strong, but not in the overt way where she was like, kicking dudes' butts and all this. And I'm not saying Anne Hathaway turns into an action hero in this movie, but it's like they have to give her all of this stuff so she's quote unquote not just the wife. And when she was that whole thing about, because she kind of makes a Cersei-esque comment about, the nature of men being like pig-headed and stubborn and, just wanting power. I'm like, yeah, real subtle here, Chris. What are you trying to do to me?
Again, I wasn't bothered by it at all by that point in the film. He was maybe, I'm not familiar with the source material for her character at all. So for me, I wasn't bothered by it at all. I was like, okay, because I've seen other female characters like that where, they've been carrying a lot of the weight, and it's still not acknowledged at all, or the fact that she can't, and she's very frustrated that she can't actually take the throne, that she has to take a suitor, and it bubbles to the top. So I guess for me, I wasn't bothered by that at all. I actually rather enjoyed that scene. But
well, I guess my biggest problem with it is she was in the poem, she's frustrated of the situation, but she still is waiting for Odysseus to come home and doesn't have any like ideas of like, I could do this job, because she realizes she can't, because she's got 108 men downstairs who, here's a good example. In the flashback scene before Odysseus leaves for Troy, she's like yelling at him and berating him, like, why do you have to go? We've got a kid on the way and all this other stuff. And he's like, well, I gotta, because he's still a mopey little bitch the entire time. And she slaps him in the face. She just straight up slaps him. I'm like, no, that's not Penelope. And that sure as hell ain't Odysseus, because I think at that point, Odysseus really loved Penelope, but he would have possibly gone a little bit Menelaus on her for that. If you catch my meaning, I'm not saying would have carved her up, but he would not have stood for that indignity. But to be fair, she would not have done that. That's not in her character. So by trying to insert all of this, hindsight is 2020 stuff and kind of social politics into the story that's 2,600 years old, it just becomes a mess, because the lessons that Homer was trying to teach us through these writings is sort of the antithesis of what Nolan is trying to say about people today.
And I mean, I understand what you're saying. Like I said, I'm not familiar enough with the material, the source material for her characters. So for me, just within the context of the film, I was fine with it, especially for that point on. I enjoyed that scene quite a bit. I thought it was definitely something that I mean, they pepper it throughout that you get the implication, but again, I think this boils down to Nolan's storytelling, in that he's got Penelope as this person who's been kind of doing the duties and such, at least in the background, if nothing else, that would be done by Odysseus, by a king. She's been doing it in the background, and it's kind of implied in a couple conversations. The problem is the scope of this story is so large that you don't have maybe an example or two of that. So I can see where that can be a bit feel like a bit out of place for her by some people when she's giving the speech. It's implied, but we don't get to see that because you only have 3 hours to tell this 1,000-page story. You know,
and he wants Odyssey is shorter than the Iliad. It is doable in 3 hours. I'm convinced.
Well, that's you. Me, it'll be like 3 years. But in any case, almost as long as Odysseus was on the island with Circe. But no, I didn't have a problem with it. I liked it. I liked Anne Hathaway's character. I liked the Penelope character. I think that's what he was trying to go for. He was trying to imply that she was carrying the burden of the kingdom, at least in the background, but because of the society the way it is, she couldn't take the throne, but she pretty much was trying to do the best she can to maintain it, while Odysseus ran off on a war that she didn't believe he should have left for in the first place, because they had a bunch of stuff at home, and he's like, well, I gotta go, and he's like, yeah, she ran off with him anyway, so that's their dispute. I mean, there's a point there. I'm just sitting there, I'm like, yeah, but that's usually not how mythology goes, or the soldiers, the duty that he's taken, the oath that he's taken, he's trying to hold to his word, and so and there's an interesting level there, but you can only cover so much ground without making this into a mini series, which it really is more served better as, I would say, storytelling wise. But at least for me, I believe that's what he was going for, and I wasn't bothered by it. But again, I didn't read the source material. But for me, I'm like, I've seen other situations, especially in this isn't medieval times, the ancient Greek times or whatever. I've seen this before, where we've had the lady in waiting who's actually been doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but no one can actually she can't officially take the throne because it has to be a guy. So for me, I didn't have a problem with that, but I can understand where you're coming from, especially if that's not how she was at all in the book. I'll shut up. I'll just say, I think Nolan did himself a disservice and I noticed it quieted down as we got closer to the film, but as the first time when he opened it up and they were doing discussions, it was like, oh, this will be a faithful retelling. Oh, we're going to make it a historical, kind of, what you remember the talks though. It was like, this is good. We're going to give you the Odyssey, the proper treatment and whatnot. And then you have now the story that actually came out, and you come to find out, well, he's made a lot of changes to where, this is not really that accurate of a story compared, translation of the actual material. But then again, you're looking at this very old story that was written from a specific perspective, and the characters, and a lot of people. I remember the Odyssey being a joke of very how manly the story is. in a number of movies, it was always made a joke of, I've got, when you've got the group of like, Boy Scouts or what, and he goes, we're going to read the Odyssey, it was like when it's nothing but boys in a camp type of joke.
It's a very masculine story, but the Odyssey in particular, that's one of the things that frustrated me so much about the press surrounding this was Lupita Nyong'o, who played Helen, famously she had that interview where the interviewer asked her, along with the other cast, if you could ask Homer one question, what would it be? And she said, well, she used the term screen time, but you can kind of take that just to mean percentage of story.
Right.
She's like, what do you think of the screen time, of this movie compared to how you treated women, in your work? And it's at that moment that you can tell that she was telling the truth when she said that she had never heard of or read the Odyssey until she got cast in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because you cannot read the Odyssey and come away thinking that Homer did not consider women.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as much as I said Penelope was kind of like the royalty of her time and she didn't have the agency of the king because that's just not the way things were back then, there were lots of other female archetypes in the story who did have a lot of agency and control, and they used it to kind of devious ends. We talked about Circe and Calypso. There's an entire island that Odysseus encounters before he gets to Ithaca, and they are people that realize who he is, and they give him this kind of a hero send off, and they offer him their princess in marriage. It's this crazy, like, after all the weird dark stuff that's been going on, you get this really glowing, like, almost moment in the Shire before he goes back to commit his massacre, and it's really kind of sweet. But anyhow, the massacre happens. In the movie, it's strange because all these people are left over after it. A bunch of the suitors get killed, but then you've got this room full of people who are kneeling down to Odysseus. And I guess we're meant to believe that those are other suitors or the servants of the suitors. No. In the book, and this is very clearly set up due to some of the terrible actions that these people commit towards Odysseus and Telemachus when they think Odysseus is a beggar, everybody has to go.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where, I mentioned Mia Goth is kind of in league with Robert Pattinson. There are 12 maids who, when Penelope goes to sleep, they sneak out of the house to go have sex and, all this other stuff with a bunch of the suitors.
Suitors, right.
Yeah, so they're in league with them, and they're kind of working against Penelope inside the house. So once after the massacre happens, and there is blood flowing like awash the floors of the castle, is the way I think they described it. Odysseus, or no, it's more Telemachus, he forces all of the maids to clean up after the massacre and to pile the bodies up outside, and I think either burn them or bury them. And then he forces them all into essentially a barn, and he hangs all of them.
Holy crap.
And there is this other guy who is kind of in league with them. He hangs him and then slices open his bowels. That's the kind of red wedding ending that I was talking about, not just the massacre of the suitors, but the aftermath. And then at the end, there's this touching thing where Odysseus goes back to find his father, Laertes, who's been kind of living in exile because he's been so distraught that his son is dead and his wife either, I don't know if she committed suicide or died of heartbreak or something like that, but she's dead. There's an entire sequence in Hades, which we get a bit of here with Sinon, who we haven't talked about Sinon deliberately because it's the Elliot Page thing, which isn't that interesting, but also Sinon is not in the Odyssey. Sinon is not in the Iliad. Sinon was in a retelling of the Odyssey / Iliad several centuries later by the Romans, an author named Virgil.
Oh,
it's almost like watching. I keep using this example, but Tim Burton's Batman, and then all of a sudden, William Katz's character from The Great American Hero shows up. You're like,
okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Anyhow, so that's kind of where it wraps up. And at the end of the story, Odysseus and Penelope are back together, but they just kind of like peace out and they leave Telemachus to run the kingdom. And my question is, how? They've just probably pissed off a lot of people by killing the sons of many kingdoms. They're like, you'll figure it out, kid. You got a nice little gold kind of like headpiece. And then the movie's over. And Odysseus announces that the age of bronze is coming to an end, which I was listening to someone else talk about this, and they said it's kind of like watching a World War I movie where someone actually uses the phrase World War I.
True.
Anyhow, we're going to close this out with some comments, and I'm going to let you go, Mark, after some final thoughts. I apologize for keeping you on so long, especially
I don't mind. I'm quite awake. So, and this has been a very, this has been an interesting discussion. So and we've managed to keep it very civil and not personal. And we've agreed to disagree on a number of points, and we've still managed to have a very pleasant conversation. So versus the way the internet usually handles things. So
I was just going to say, internet, I hope you're taking notes. All right. Scotty jumps in again and says, hi. Oh, and then we have Maryam. Hey, welcome back. Came in 7 minutes late. I have no intention of watching the movie. I'm enjoying your profound and honest discussion of the various aspects of the movie. Eternally grateful to you, gentlemen. Well, we're grateful for you too. Also, fortunately, there's a BBC radio adaptation of the Odyssey here. Can't wait to listen to it. I don't know if you can post a link to that in the comments, or maybe I can look for it. If it's online, I would love to listen to that. Although I will say, Ian McKellen narrated the Odyssey 30 years ago, I think, for the Eagles adaptation. I got it as a free book on Audible. It's
great. My Lord.
Yeah, I listened to parts of it when I was unable to sit down with the book. I stopped reading the literary source prior to watching the movie adaptation after being triple scarred after watching the Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, and The Help.
I can tell you my coworker has some serious opinions about Angels and Demons and the Da Vinci Code, and she's like, look, I like Tom Hanks as a performer. She's like, but he was not that character. She feels very passionate about Angels and Demons and the Da Vinci Code and the movie adaptation of those. But anyway, sorry.
Well, I got to say, Maryam, I understand where you're coming from, and Mark can attest to this, as can all the other Earth's Mightiest critics who are probably tired to death of hearing me talk about books. But because we've had so many adaptations of things in the last few years, I've rediscovered a love for reading, and it really is true. The book is always better. But what's puzzling is the liberties that filmmakers take when adapting the source material. And you just, like in this, wondering why. It was all there on the page. Scotty says, thank you for calling out the misandry in this film. You're welcome. Let's see. Marianne says, enjoying listening to your psychological interpretation of the characters' actions is always profoundly enlightening and enriching. Well, we like to enrich here at Kicking the Seat. Thank you.
We try. Anyway.
Yeah. As with each discussion, I'm yelling here. Why haven't the directors contacted them before shooting the movie? Hey, my DMs are open. Let's see.
Hollywood, his DMs are open. Oh, wait, not all of Hollywood. Just the directors. No, not everybody. I'm sorry, Ian. I'm sorry for the messages you're going to get in your DMs now from Hollywood. So,
oh wow, yeah, lots of different ways you can take that. And then Maryam says, "This is the best way to start my day. It's 5:30 a.m. over here, which means you started this at 3 something." Wow.
Well, when she posted that, I think it was like 4, probably 4.
Well, thank you very much. for getting up with us. I hope we're as good as coffee. It was sophisticated and amusing. Eternally grateful to you, gentlemen, for the time you gave watching and reviewing it. Wishing you all the best and abundance and everything you aspire to in life. Well, thank you very much, and I really appreciate that. I hope to see you back here in the comments soon, and I hope you're off to bed or dashing out to work. Either way, Petty. Hey guys,
Petty. How you doing, Petty? Good to see you.
With a super chat. Wow. Hi guys. Ian, here's the first installment of the debt of honor I owe you. It's all YouTube lets me send in a single super chat. Wow.
Gee.
Thank you. Let's see. Kiyoshi Madoshi says it's more like us saying the age of AI is coming to an end. Very true. Let's see. Petty with another super chat. Thank you so much. And here's the rest. That settles the $6 you spent renting Citizen Vigilante. Since I was the one who asked for it to be analyzed during a previous live stream, I feel personally responsible for putting you through that ordeal. I don't, because and folks, this is a plug. Thank you, Petty. Go check out the Citizen Vigilante review I did with Jeff York. Went up late last week or earlier this week. Time means nothing, but yeah, I'm glad I watched it, because that was another hour and 20-minute discussion of a very interesting film. Miriam A, the link to it.
YouTube might not allow her to post the link to it, but I'm sure you can Google it.
Okay, I will Google it. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Mark. Sorry, Miriam. It looks like the
YouTube might block it. It depends. They get funky on that. So
the YouTube gods have, Oh, last
Rumble.
last note. I promise. I'm gonna let you go.
No,
The fact that there are no gods in this movie.
Hmm.
Athena, played by Zendaya. We see her talking to Matt Damon throughout the film. He's always alone. It's very Sixth Sense. At the end of the movie, we get a giant flashback to the siege of Troy, which, again, much like the temple battle scene, yeah, it's kind of cool, but also messes with the rhythm that's established in the book to the point where there's all this action for momentum going on, and then there's this lull that gradually ramps up to the massacre. Anyhow, the sacking of Troy, Zendaya is a Trojan lady who is beheaded in front of Odysseus. I don't remember did he behead her, or did he see her beheaded?
He saw her beheaded because we got, for the fourth time, the head of the statue being knocked over onto the ground, and then the guards bring her over to Odysseus, and he watches as one of the guys beheads her.
Right.
Which rated R, it happens off camera, classic old school style, to which I'm just like, okay.
So that when that moment happens, Odysseus is talking, he's in conversation, and I think he's put his hand out, and Athena has put her hand out. And then when we come back out of the flashback, Athena's hand is not there, and he kind of like grabs for the air.
Right.
So we are meant to believe that Athena was not a god, but a trauma ghost that he kind of personified as a god.
That part confused me a bit, because I thought she was Athena, and maybe it was the, Athena taking the form of her, but we don't have anything set up. So if you're looking at it at a 2026 lens, she's a trauma ghost and not an actual god visiting him and giving him guidance, which was a little of one of the confusing choices he made, where I was like, okay, so we're still removing some of this mythology stuff that's very much prevalent in the Odyssey, that everybody is part of the parts people really enjoy.
Right. And that's the thing, is like, it's not that is not Athena sent down in human form, because, and again, you'd have to have the context of the books, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Athena was sort of like, from what I read, and I have not expanded on, Greek mythology writ large. Mostly I know a few things, but most I'm gathering from these two sources in preparation for this movie. But Athena was kind of like the Odysseus of the gods. She was very cunning and very, knowledgeable, very strategic. And she was working with Odysseus and Telemachus to bring about this grand revenge plot, kind of like hopping between the both of them. That's why you see her guiding Telemachus away from the assassins in the cove. And then also why she shows up on Calypso's island to say, hey, cut it out, I need Odysseus back. So she would not appear as a victim. Like, she wouldn't put herself in the point of view of someone who's come down to earth just to be beheaded, which is weirdly like kind of like Christ imagery almost, but that's not what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, it's alluded because I think it's the statue of Athena that gets beheaded as well.
And okay, so it's the girl, the Trojan girl, she gets beheaded, and then it makes more sense why, that juxtaposition of the statue, the beheaded statue of Athena and the beheaded girl flashing into the present of this spirit that he's been talking to. That's not Athena. That is his depiction, him talking to himself, which you can understand, because after all the stuff he's been through, he's been away 10 years and he's gradually become more and more alone. He's got to talk to somebody and work out his post-war trauma, I guess.
Right. But again, it was a little confusing that I'm like, okay, does that mean that that when that happened, I'm like, well, wait, was that Athena all along taking the form of the woman that he, saw killed in front of him, or was the woman that he saw killed in front of him initially, was he picturing the statue, and then it actually wasn't a statue that was being beheaded of Athena. It was actually
No, it was it.
Trojan girl.
I think what it was the statue just happened to be the Athena statue just happened to be beheaded at the exact same moment as he saw this Trojan girl get beheaded. And that moment solidified his trauma. That was the psychic bolt that went through his soul and gave him the PTSD that he's been working through. So later on, when he's quote unquote talking to the goddess Athena, he is picturing her as this woman that was killed in the temple of Athena.
Which again alludes to what the impression I got from Nolan doing, which was a surprise, which was trying to ground this story more than make it a fantastical story, which I just thought, that's a choice, but that was an interesting angle to take. So you're like, oh, so that really wasn't the ghost, that wasn't actually the goddess Athena, that was Odysseus. That was Odysseus imagining Athena as that girl because of his trauma, which I was like, okay, that's different. But then that changes kind of some other context of things that had happened earlier in the film and some, impressions you got of her character. And I know that was kind of like supposed to be like a reveal moment, but I thought it was an odd moment. And I'm like, okay, so that wasn't Athena. I'm like, oh, that kind of sucks, because it would have made more sense if it was Athena.
Well, but here's the thing. I'm glad it wasn't, because then it's like, well, where are the other gods? Like, why are we not seeing them personified? It also raises a big question. If there are no gods in this movie because you wanted to ground it, then what's with the 9-foot armored giants? What's with the 20-foot tall, or however, the Cyclops? What's with the Scylla, the giant 6-headed snake monster that lives in the cave and comes down and grabs people out of the sea? There's all of these monsters and fantastical stuff in a movie, in a reality where there are no gods. Now, sure, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But again, that's not the Odyssey. And it's also, I think pretty sloppy.
Well, I mean, and then if you have the whole Athena is actually the trauma ghost of, and he's manifesting this is what he's imagining Athena is, because he's equating the young woman who was beheaded with the statue, then it calls into question all the other things that his memory is recounting of what may have actually killed his men.
And this is where it gets into, did you share that meme about all the people in Christopher Nolan movies wanting to go home?
Oh, yeah.
But it's also, and this was the interesting thing about some of the famous translators of Homer have come out in recent days critiquing Christopher Nolan's approach, including Emily Wilson, the person that he allegedly based a lot of his take on. And she criticizes the lack of, gods, the lack of glorying in war, which again is kind of distasteful from a modern lens. But if you don't like it, then don't adapt the Odyssey. But in terms of, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. It pulled out of the station. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Nolan has that certain archetype of the broken, troubled man going on this kind of journey, and he kind of hates himself for some kind of a past trauma. This most reminded me of the end of Memento, where we find out that this guy who keeps blacking out every few minutes or whatever, and it's this crime story. At the end, we find out that he sabotages himself in order to keep this pattern going and hide the fact that, the horror of what he'd actually done. He's not, he's trying to basically solve a crime that he's committed, or crimes. Right. And that's kind of what we're looking at in a roundabout way with and
that's kind of the impression I get, which I thought was, again, an interesting choice, but you're taking probably one of the most popular pieces of literature in culture for centuries.
It's not hyperbole to call it foundational text.
Right. Foundational text, kind of similar to, in some ways, John Carter. When John Carter came out, a lot of people who watched it, their criticism was, oh, I've seen this before in this. I've seen it before in this. I've seen it. And I'm sitting here going, Yeah, that's because they grew their inspiration from John Carter. John Carter inspired those things that you saw first. But since you saw those first and you see them in John Carter, you're like, well, we've seen this many times before. Yeah, but this is the first, and so I could see that angle. And there's also a reason why cinematically very few filmmakers, studios or otherwise, have tackled an exact or trying to do an adaptation of the actual text. We get inspirations of, like, "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," which is, has the main elements everybody's familiar with wrapped into this, this time period of the Great Depression and that. And I love that movie. But it's inspired by, but it definitely is not intended to be any type of retelling. But there's very few places that try to take on this story for this exact reasons that we've mentioned tonight: the scope, the scale, how you're going to actually approach some of the more problematic material in it, due to the age, and do you hold true, or if you're going to do this as an interpretation, that's fine, then make sure you're emphasizing that this is an interpretation, then trying to say, oh yeah, we're going to try to really hold true to the source material and whatnot, which I do remember at one point was coming up in early conversations about this film. And I may be misremembering, but I could have sworn that I heard some things where it was like, oh, we're going to do this, historically and then try to be accurate as possible and yada, yada. But there's a reason why, and it's for the reasons we've mentioned. Like, this is a text that is intended to be read, but not necessarily adapted into at least a movie. A series, yes. Movie.
No, here's the thing. For as much as he messed this up, I think Christopher Nolan proved that you can adapt the Odyssey, and you can do it within 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think you can do it in 3 hours with IMAX cameras. You need
regular
CG, you need a bit of more flexibility and scope. But the stuff that he added could be easily taken out. The stuff that he omitted can be added back in, even in montage. Like I mentioned, like a bunch of those island kind of situations, they're very brief chapters in the book that just say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if there was an island where people did drugs all day? Hey, wouldn't it be cool if there was an island of cannibals? And it's like a couple of pages, maybe. So you do that in montage, like, and then we went here and we had to run away, and then, that kind of thing. So you do that in 5 minutes instead of 25 or whatever they do here, and then you move it along. But I think in terms of, epics, again, you can do this, but it's going to take someone with guts to, as you say, adapt it, but not necessarily adapt it to the age. People have brought up, and I think it'd be it's a big problem because of who he is, but I think he's got the chops. Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson could take this material and make it harsh, make it violent, and make it true to the source. Now, would anyone ever give him $250 million to make the Odyssey, especially now? No, but
it's a controversial choice. It's a controversial choice for sure. So
for many reasons. But I would love to have seen him try it. Now, before we go, I want to give. You already gave one recommendation as to "Oh Brother, We're Out There," but I have 3 inspired by the Odyssey movies that I want to recommend instead of seeing the Odyssey. No one's going to listen to me because everyone wants to go see this for themselves, except for maybe Mary M. But at least if I can get you to read the Odyssey, I've won. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Steve Martin is just trying to get home, and he keeps getting waylaid by all these different adventures. And he's got this companion who is in himself, he's a walking Greek tragedy. Ben-Hur, which we talked about earlier this year. 3.5 hour epic, much grander scope, much more in terms of adventure, and it is a period piece, so it's not nearly as diverse as this thing, so that might be a hurdle for some people, but it's a grand epic tale. And speaking of which, my third pick is A Knight's Tale, the Heath Ledger movie from 2001.
I love that movie. That movie's so much fun.
I do too. And honestly, the moment that they don't have in the movie, but they have at the end of the poem, where Odysseus goes and finds his dad, reminded me of that scene in A Knight's Tale where he confronts his dad who's blind and he wasn't sure what happened to his son, all that stuff. That's where that came from. I'm convinced.
Oh,
okay.
Miriam has one comment too.
You're going to close this out. I watched the miniseries Ben-Hur. I did not watch the miniseries, but I'm talking about the film with Charlton Heston. Recently came out in 4K like a few months ago. From,
it's
WB.
a gorgeous 4K. It's a beautiful release. They really did justice to that release. I was like very impressed what they did with the Ben-Hur release. I was like, wow. I'm like, damn.
And listen to the BBC. I'm living in the wrong country. They have a BBC radio adaptation of Ben-Hur. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, you can find it.
All right. Well, I will be on the lookout. Mark, this might be our longest live stream ever, and I'm going to let you go to bed. You've been up since 3. You've been up almost as long as Miriam's been.
Yeah.
No, but thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you to all the people who tuned in over the course of these 2 hours. We're not quite the runtime of the Odyssey, but we're ticking up there. I'm not going to torture you with more.
You can if you want. I mean,
no, I have to get to bed.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
I think though our conversation tonight shows though the various different opinions you can have on this film, and everybody's kind of get the impression we've all said that you and I have a different perspective on a number of the scenes on here. Yeah, it's Rob. We're just wrapping up Solid Snake. We're just wrapping up. Again, it's why I love movies. I think though, in general, what kept me from really being in awe is just the same reason that Oppenheimer didn't just floor me, but I enjoyed it. I think Nolan has a very great knowledge and can craft technically and production wise and everything. He's got that down. I think though Nolan is becoming a victim of his own self as far as his storytelling goes, kind of an M. Night situation in that I would love to see Nolan handle something that he doesn't have a direct writing.
Well, someone pointed this out. Like, he and his brother used to collaborate. Like Jonathan Nolan wrote a lot of the movies, and they were the better ones. And I think since whatever split they had in the last few years, at least for me personally, I don't think I liked Interstellar. I need to revisit it because I didn't love it. I think the last act, or I should say the 6th act of that movie, kind of dragged a bit. But I couldn't stand Tenet. I couldn't stand Oppenheimer.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly didn't like this movie. Again, kudos for the technical prowess. I guess I think he kind of got in his way with this one. But I think he needs smaller films, I think is what I'm saying.
Smaller films, or just I think he really handicapped himself as far as how you can shoot something by completely committing to the IMAX. And I think he may have realized why other filmmakers shoot a lot in IMAX, but they also shoot with regular, just red cameras or other cameras, because it's the same thing that, and I know we're going long, but what it reminded me of was Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet. Now, I love Kenneth Branagh, and Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet is good, but he shot that on CinemaScope. He had to search Hollywood for the last surviving 2 or 3 cameras. And you can tell because there's this wonderful tracking shot in this golden palace where Hamlet's at or whatever, and it's tracking, but you can see the wobble of the camera because the camera is so huge that he was very limited in a lot of the shots that he could do. So while he could do tracking shots on track, a lot of the shots in that are kind of wide and in place because you can't just move that CinemaScope camera around, because he shot it on film too, I believe. And I think Nolan limited himself there, and I think that's what kept me a bit was the fact of all the cuts. We don't get huge amount of areas where there's emotional beats long enough without a cut, because you can only do 3 or 4 minutes with the IMAX camera before you're reloading.
It's a great point, and you also remind me I need to watch Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet because I've never seen it.
Oh, really? Oh, it's good. It's a good interpretation. I like Kenneth. I'm a stan for Kenneth Branagh. So
me too. I'm embarrassed that I haven't watched it. My English teacher had a poster of that movie up in his classroom.
I think every English teacher had a poster of that movie up in their classroom.
Rob says, I was coming on here to watch the replay, had no idea it would still be going. Lol. And then he says, for me, I don't think he's ever going to top Memento. Yeah, Memento, I saw that. I don't know how many times I saw that in the theater. I love that movie. So I haven't seen it in a long time. But two quick things. Again, I promise 2 quick things.
No worries.
We said we're going to talk about box office. It sounds like you had some thoughts.
Just my quick thought, and I've been commenting this on every Facebook because a lot of the folks who really enjoy Nolan, which again, you enjoy who you enjoy, you like who you like. Sure. I'm very happy people are celebrating Nolan and, they enjoy his films to the depth they do. Mad props. I love Maximum Overdrive. Okay, everybody's going to look at me. So you have your own taste. I don't fault anyone, but since everybody nowadays since COVID especially hinge apparently so much on box office, just take into account that yes, Nolan has a 3-hour rated R epic, which could have been PG-13, and it's made all this at the box office, but a lot of that comes from IMAX money.
Yes.
So just take that into thought with the box office numbers, is the fact there aren't a lot of IMAX theaters, but the IMAX ticket for me 3 times as much as what I pay at my local theater. Mm-hmm. So that's going to change the box office numbers. And for me, box office numbers have never meant much to me, in all honesty, but I'm old Gen X, and I'm from a time when there were movies that people loved that no one went out to see, but that were really great movies. They just didn't make much at the box office. And I'm like, that for me doesn't exactly put a lot of weight, but I know it's more weight nowadays by folks. And so I just want them to take that into account, thinking you're looking at IMAX money involved in this box office numbers.
Well, and that's a great point, because I think, what did this make? 260 or something?
Yeah, 260, I believe. 260 million.
Globally. Yeah. And I read something today that like the IMAX alone was something like 60 million out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not trying to, I'll say it, I hate this movie. And you can take all the technical aspects out of it. I think that there are some things that work and some things that don't. It mostly, I don't think, doesn't work because of a fundamental storytelling and an overall thematic, misinterpretation, I would say deliberately so, of the themes. But let's just say this movie costs reported $250 million. The common Hollywood wisdom is it needs to make 2.5 times its budget in order to become profitable,
right?
Because you have to factor in marketing, you have to factor in the roughly 50% cut that the movie theaters take, because some territories take less, whatever, but it averages out to about 50%. And then on top of that, I didn't get the details of this, but Nolan apparently got this crazy financial deal, having to deal with the profits of this movie, and there's other people I'm sure to be taking profits off of this. So this movie needs to make a heck of a lot of money, and I think once the IMAX fervor dies down, when a certain web slinger returns to the screens in a couple of weeks, yes, it had a blockbuster first weekend. It's going to have a great second weekend because there's nothing really coming out. And
you've got the ticket sales already, pre-sales, because they've got, for like a month in some areas, the IMAX theaters are sold out, even with the round-the-clock showings. So
right. So I don't know how well this is going to do once it just goes to IMAX. Now, it might do very well because you've got that 3 times inflated ticket price. But I think, and you kind of hinted at this here, in terms of like a salvo in the culture war and like, hey, we won because everybody loves this movie, everyone's going to see it. A lot of people are going to see it. But when you look at that ticket price, that means you're getting less foot traffic, but more money. Right. So what does that mean? And people are going to see it as a curiosity. Are they going back? Are they seeing it multiple times? Probably not in IMAX because, that's a lot.
It's pricey. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know what it all means. But
I don't know what it all means. I mean, there's a reason why we didn't really have any big releases this month because everybody saw the Odyssey coming. And so, but like this weekend, like you said, there's nothing really out, so it's going to make bank again. It's going to be #1 at the box office again because there's really no competition. What are you going to have a competition? The one action film that's coming out this weekend or something?
No, there's the new Nicholas Winding Refn movie that's going to light the world on fire.
But that's not on a lot of screens either because it's not at every screen around here. And I know what you're saying. By the way, yeah, I know, but I'm just saying that it's going to have a good weekend, but it is going to be interesting when Spider-Man drops because people have been salivating for another Spider-Man film for a long time because we haven't had one, for a while for obvious reasons. So people have been really waiting for this one. So they're going to come out in droves for that film next weekend. And that's in August. And now you're sliding into August. Now you're sliding into awards season movies soon. Actually August has more summer movies coming out than July or June had summer movies, quote unquote summer movies coming out. It's really crazy. So it is going to see. I mean, Solid Snake makes a point. It is sold out until September in London at their IMAX theater. So the IMAXs are going to be quite busy. That's for sure. But how many people will be going back you're right, the question. A lot of those are going to be first time, one-time watches. And can the IMAX hype, can that carry it to a profitable state that it'll be in,
And we'll see. I was going to say they missed out on a Barbenheimer-esque opportunity here because I think a couple of summers ago or 3 summers ago now, you had Barbie and Oppenheimer, and it became Barbenheimer. If they could have just held off for a couple of weeks with this movie, you could have had the Spidacy. Yeah. Spider-Man and the Odyssey together. Because they have overlapping casts. John Bernthal, Zendaya, and Tom Holland.
They do have overlapping casts. It's going to be weird that they're going to have those. We got a trio of actors in 2 different movies at the same time in the theater next weekend. That's going to be kind of wild. But I think the true test is when you're moving into Spider-Man territory, when you're moving into some of these shorter kind of summer movies. You've got that other one, the whatever street, that's the dinosaur,
End of Oak Street,
End of Oak Street, and
with
you've got
Anne Hathaway. There's 10 movie stars left, and they're in everything.
They're in it, but you've got a number of other movies that are coming out that are kind of popcorny films that may draw an audience because they look entertaining, at least, and so it'll be interesting to see its lasting power going forward if that momentum is going to keep rolling.
Well, speaking of a power that doesn't last, I think Masters of the Universe dropped on Amazon Prime today.
It did drop Amazon Prime. I can't wait. I'm going to watch it this weekend because, hell yeah.
You saw it, right?
I saw it.
We talked about it.
Yeah.
Sorry. The way you said it just now is like, wait, I thought for sure you.
No, I'm going to see it. I'm going to see it again. My wife hasn't seen it, so we may sit down and watch together. Watch it with her. Fun. But I'll watch it. I'll watch it again because I actually enjoyed that film for all the warts it has. I enjoy that film.
I loved it. That was the big crime for me, is like why more people didn't engage with that one. I understand.
But I know you're trying to end it all, but this is a long film. But I guess that was my point, is that you and I don't see eye to eye to everything with this film. But in general, I don't think, for me, people throw around the M word a lot lately with every other film. And I'm like, it's okay to just think a film is okay. Well, even if it's Nolan, even if it's Spielberg. Hell, Spielberg's had 2 movies where people are like,
Well, look, Mark, I am fully prepared to use the M word for the Odyssey, and that word is masturbatory. Anyhow, Rob says her private Odyssey. Wow. And Odyssey in the box. Look, you be nice to
the other Odyssey if it stays in theaters until Other Mother comes out. There you go.
I still haven't seen the trailer for Other Mother. I'm kind of excited.
I haven't watched the trailer for Doomsday yet, so I'm and I haven't rushed to go see that. I know we're going long, but that's going to be an interesting box office weekend. That Doomsday weekend is going to be a very interesting weekend for sure.
I'd be cool if they did a last minute swap in. You got Timothy Chalamet showing up as Dr. Dune.
Dr. Dune.
Yeah. I don't know I don't know which movie I'm least excited for more. Anyhow, Mark, we're going to leave it there. Mark Krawczyk of Special Mark Productions and the Spoiler Room podcast. Rob says he thinks Oak Street is going to flop.
It probably is, but I think it's gonna pull some family, in all honesty, some Jurassic Park fans and such. So
yeah. Well, thank you to everybody for hanging out again. I swear the show's over. We're doing a Ferris Bueller thing at the after credits. Go home. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for joining us. This has been a truly epic live stream and discussion of a film that, is not so much. But we definitely appreciate it. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, tell all your friends. No live show next week. We're taking a week off. But we will be back on Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. talking about Death Walks at Midnight, the 1972 Giallo film, as Accademia Giallo returns. So join us live there. You can look at the Kicking the Seat YouTube channel to find a link so you can follow along. And be sure and follow Mark at Special Mark Productions on the Spoiler Room podcast. All the information is down below, along with all of Earth's Mightiest critics, including Rob of The Flickering Myth, who joined in as a codename Solid Snake 1989. Don't stay up. Yeah, don't stay up watching the entire replay because it's been almost 2.5 hours, man. Get some sleep. But thank you out there, everyone who joined in live or are watching the replay. Until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much and take care.